My mother-in-law was standing in her big marble entrance on Christmas Eve. Her face was full of anger and disgust as she shouted words I will never forget. She told me to get out of her house and called me a useless loser. She said I was never good enough for her family and never would be. I looked at my wife, Delaney. I had loved her for 8 years and she was the mother of my child. I waited for her to say something, anything. I hoped for one word to defend me or even a small sign that our marriage mattered to her. But she stood behind her mother with her arms crossed and her eyes on the floor. She said nothing at all. My 7-year-old daughter Willa was standing in the hallway watching everything. Her face was pale and her eyes were filled with fear and confusion. She heard her grandmother yelling and saw her mother stay silent. In that moment, she made a choice that broke my heart and healed it at the same time. She ran to me, held my hand tightly with both of hers, and softly said, "I want to go with you, Daddy." I looked at her and felt something break inside me, not because I was insulted or betrayed, but because my 7-year-old child understood loyalty better than the adults in that room. She chose me when no one else did. I held her hand and said, "Okay, sweetheart, let's go." I took our coats from the closet. Behind me, my mother-in-law, Patrice, was still shouting about lawyers, custody, and how I would never see Willa again. Her husband, Howell, stood quietly in the corner of the living room with a glass of whiskey, watching like it was just a TV show. He didn't say anything. He never did. As I reached for the door, Delaney finally spoke. She said we should wait and talk about it tomorrow and asked me to leave. Willa there for the night. I turned and looked at my wife, the woman who promised to love me in good times and bad. She had just watched her mother destroy me and did nothing to stop it. "Leave her here," I said, "with people who just told me I'm worthless, so she can hear more about what a failure her father is." "No, she's coming with me." Delaney said I was being dramatic. I told her she was being a coward. Then I walked out the front door, Willa's hand still holding mine tightly. The cold hit us right away. It was 28 degrees and light snow was falling. My truck was parked at the end of the long driveway, past the perfect hedges and the stone fountain that cost more than I earned in a year. I put Willa in the back seat and turned the heater up as high as it would go. My hands were shaking, but not because of the cold. I drove away without knowing where I was going. I had no family to call. My parents died when I was 9. My grandfather had moved away years ago and barely stayed in touch. I had a few friends, but none I could show up to on Christmas Eve with a scared child and no explanation. I ended up parking in an empty grocery store lot about 3 miles from the mansion. The store was closed and the lot was silent. I parked under a streetlight, leaned my seat back, and tried to figure out what to do next. Willa climbed into the front seat and curled up against me. I held her as tightly as I could. She asked why her grandma was yelling at me. I told her that sometimes people say hurtful things when they're angry. She said I didn't do anything wrong. Tears filled my eyes as I agreed. Then she asked why we were sitting in the car. I kissed her head and told her that sometimes doing the right thing means walking away. After a moment, she said she was glad she came with me. I told her I was glad too. She fell asleep about an hour later. I stayed awake, watching the snow land on the windshield while the cold slowly came through the doors. I thought about my life and how I ended up there, a 36-year-old man sleeping in his truck on Christmas Eve because the family I married into decided I wasn't good enough. I believed that was the lowest moment of my life. I thought nothing could feel worse than that night, holding my daughter and having no idea what tomorrow would bring. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to someone knocking on my window. The sun was just rising, lighting the empty parking lot. My neck and back hurt. Willa was still asleep against me, her warm breath on my collar. I looked up and saw a man standing beside my truck. He looked to be in his late 50s, with silver hair and a gray suit that probably cost more than my truck. He held a leather briefcase and looked at me calmly. I rolled down the window, letting the cold air in. I asked if I could help him. He nodded and said my name. I confirmed it. He introduced himself as Benjamin Kavanaugh and said he was a lawyer handling the estate of Elwood Danvers. He paused and his expression softened slightly. "Mr. Danvers, I'm sorry to tell you that your grandfather passed away 3 days ago. I've been trying to contact you since last night. My grandfather, the man who raised me, who taught me how to work with my hands, how to be patient, and how to live with honesty, was gone. He was the one who left Ohio when I was 22 and slowly drifted out of my life. like an old photo fading in the sun. I felt Willa move against my chest and realized I was crying. "Mr. Danvers," the lawyer said gently, "I need to speak with you in private. What I'm about to tell you will change your life." He wasn't exaggerating. To understand how I ended up in that parking lot, you need to know where my story began. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. My parents, Richard and Teresa Danvers, were killed in a car accident when I was 9 years old. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit them while they were coming home from a dinner party. That night I was staying with my grandfather, Elwood. He was the one who opened the door when the police arrived. He was the one who held me as I cried for days. From that moment on, he raised me. Grandpa Elwood restored furniture for a living. He owned a small shop on the east side of Columbus, where he brought old broken pieces back to life. Chairs passed down through families, tables covered in stains and burn marks, dressers that looked ready to be thrown away. He would take them into his workshop, and weeks later they would come out looking better than new. He taught me everything: how to strip wood carefully, how to mix stains to match any color, how to fix joints, replace hardware, and see value in things others had given up on. By the time I was 16, I worked with him every day after school. By 20, I had clients of my own. I believed I would spend my whole life in that shop with him, growing old together, sanding wood and talking about nothing important. But when I was 22, everything changed. One morning, Grandpa told me he was leaving. He said he had unfinished business out west, something he needed to do before he got too old. I begged him to stay. I asked what could be more important than the life we built together. He placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "You're ready, Corbin. You don't need me anymore, but I need to do this." He signed the shop over to me and left for Arizona 3 weeks later. After that, we spoke on the phone a few times a year. Over time, the calls became shorter and uncomfortable. I thought he was struggling. I imagined him living alone, running out of money, too proud to ask for help. I sent him money when I could, but he always sent it back. 4 years after he left, I met Delaney Holbrook. She walked into my workshop one Tuesday afternoon carrying an old rocking chair that had belonged to her great-great-grandmother. One of the spindles was broken and the seat was worn out. She asked if I could fix it. I told her I could, and I did. When she came back 3 weeks later to pick it up, we talked for 2 hours. She was finishing law school at Ohio State. She was smart, beautiful, and laughed at my bad jokes. She said she liked that I worked with my hands, and that there was something honest about a man who built real things instead of staring at a screen. We got married 18 months later. From the start, her parents, Patrice and Howell Holbrook, made it clear they didn't approve of me. Patrice was a former socialite who married into money and spent her life showing it off. Howell was a retired investment banker who judged people by how much they earned. At our first dinner together, Patrice looked at my rough hands and asked, "So you fix old chairs for a living?" She said it like she was talking about dirty work. Howell barely spoke to me at all and directed every comment to Delaney as if I wasn't there. Back then, Delaney defended me. She told her mother she loved me and didn't care what she thought. She told her father I was a good man and deserved respect. I believed her. I truly thought our love was strong enough to survive her family's judgment. I was wrong. The changes came slowly. After we married, Delaney stopped visiting my shop. She used to bring me lunch and watch me work. Then her visits became rare and eventually they stopped completely. She began criticizing my clothes, my truck, and the sawdust in my hair. She stopped calling me a craftsman and started saying I worked in furniture, like it was something shameful. Every holiday at the Holbrook mansion became painful. Patrice made comments about my low income. Howell bragged about his friend's successful children. Delaney laughed along while I sat quietly, wondering what happened to the woman who once said money didn't matter to her. Then came Christmas Eve, 8 years into our marriage, the night that ended everything and the morning that started something new. We arrived at the Holbrook mansion around 4 in the afternoon on Christmas Eve. Willa was excited, bouncing in her seat as we drove up the long driveway. She loved Christmas, the lights, the tree, the presents. She had no idea what was about to happen. Delaney had driven separately earlier that day, saying she needed to help her mother prepare for dinner. I didn't argue. I had learned long ago that arguing with Delaney about her family was useless. She always chose their side. The house looked like it belonged in a glossy magazine. A 12-foot Christmas tree filled the front window. Garlands wrapped around the columns and candles glowed in every window. It was beautiful but cold, just like the people who lived there. Patrice opened the door with a smile that never reached her eyes. She hugged Willa and told her how lovely she looked. Then she glanced at me and said, "Corbin, you're here." No greeting, no Christmas wish, just a reminder that I existed. Dinner began at 6. There were 12 guests, mostly Patrice's friends and their husbands. I knew my role well by then. Smile, nod, act like I belonged among people who owned vacation homes and investment accounts. Answer questions about my small furniture shop while pretending not to. Notice the judgment behind them. The subtle insults started early. Patrice asked how my shop was doing, then turned to the woman beside her and said, "Corbin fixes old furniture. It's more of a hobby." "Really?" The woman nodded politely and changed the subject. Howell spent most of the evening talking about his golf partner's son, a man who had just become a partner at a famous law firm. "Only 34, Howell said, looking in my direction. "Some people just have ambition. You can see it early." Delaney laughed along with him. She never once looked at me. After dinner, everyone moved to the living room for drinks and dessert. I said I needed the restroom, but what I really needed was air. I walked down the hallway toward the back door when I heard voices coming from Howell's study. The door was slightly open, and I instantly recognized Delaney's voice. I stopped even though I knew I shouldn't listen. "I don't know what to do, Mom," she said. "I've tried to make it work, but I can't anymore." Patrice replied sharply, "You've wasted 8 years on that man. 8 years. He'll never give you the life you deserve. He'll never be more than he is now. A man fixing chairs in a dirty little shop." I waited for Delaney to defend me. I waited for any sign of the woman I married. Instead, she said, "I know, Mom, I've been thinking about it. I just don't know how to tell him. Especially with Willa, she loves him so much." "Children adapt," Patrice said. "Willa will be fine. She deserves a better example than a man who comes home smelling like wood stain." I couldn't listen anymore. I stepped into the doorway. Delaney's face turned pale. Patrice looked at me calmly, without shame or regret. She meant every word. "How long?" I asked Delaney. My voice stayed calm, but my hands were shaking. "How long have you been planning this?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "Corbin, this isn't how I wanted you to find out," Delaney said. "Answer the question," I replied. Patrice stepped forward. "She doesn't owe you an explanation. This marriage was a mistake from the start, and we're finally fixing it." "I wasn't talking to you," I said. Patrice's eyes hardened. "Don't speak to me like that in my own house. You're nothing, Corbin. You've always been nothing. A broke loser living off my daughter." "That's not true," I said. "I've worked every day of my life. I've never taken a single dollar from your family. And what do you have to show for it?" She snapped. "A falling apart shop and a truck older than your child. You're a failure, and I won't let you drag this family down anymore." She pointed toward the door. "Get out of my house." I looked at Delaney one last time. "Are you going to say anything?" She finally met my eyes. "Maybe you should leave, Corbin. Just for tonight. We'll talk tomorrow." That was the moment I knew my marriage was over. I didn't really sleep that night. I drifted in and out, waking every time Willa moved or the wind shook the truck. I kept the heater running all night, burning gas I couldn't afford, but I wasn't going to let my daughter get cold. Around 3 in the morning, I checked my phone. No calls, no text, no message asking if her daughter was safe on Christmas Eve. Just the time and a low battery warning. I turned the phone off and stared at the truck's ceiling. I thought about my grandfather and what he would say if he could see me. He always believed a person's true character showed in their lowest moments. Anyone could be good when life was easy. Integrity showed itself when everything fell apart. I didn't know if I was passing that test or failing it. When the sun finally rose, the parking lot was covered in a thin layer of snow. My neck hurt. My back was stiff. My feet were numb, even with the heater on. Willa was still asleep, curled tightly against me, like she was trying to hide inside my chest. I was trying to figure out what to do next when I heard a knock on the window. I looked up and saw a man I had never met before. He was tall, with silver hair and a face shaped by years in courtrooms and boardrooms. His charcoal gray suit was perfectly fitted, the kind that cost more than most people's rent. He held a leather briefcase and looked at me calmly. I rolled down the window, letting the cold air rush in. Willa shifted but didn't wake. "Mr. Corbin Danvers?" he asked.
That's me.
Who are you? My name is Benjamin Kavanaugh, he said. I'm an attorney representing the estate of Elwood Danvers. He paused, and his voice grew gentler. Your grandfather. My stomach sank. What about him? Is he okay? Mr. Kavanaugh slowly shook his head. I'm sorry. Mr. Danvers, your grandfather passed away 3 days ago in Sedona, Arizona. I've been trying to reach you since last night. I left several messages. The words hit me hard. My grandfather was gone. The man who raised me, who taught me everything I knew, who had been my only real family for most of my life. He was dead, and I hadn't even known he was sick. How did you find me? I asked quietly. Your grandfather arranged a location service on your phone years ago. Mr. Kavanaugh said, he wanted to make sure I could find you when the time came, no matter where you were. He glanced at the sleeping child, in my arms and then back at me. It seems he was right. You needed me to come to you. I didn't know what to say. He had known where I was all this time. Why hadn't he called? Why hadn't he come to see me? Mr. Danvers, the attorney continued, I need to talk to you about your grandfather's estate. There's a lot to discuss, and I think it would be better to do it somewhere warm. There's a diner across the street. Maybe we can talk there. I looked at the diner. It was a small place called Molly's, the kind that served strong coffee in heavy mugs and pancakes bigger than the plate. The lights were on, and a few cars were parked outside. Okay, I said. Let me wake my daughter. Willa stirred when I touched her shoulder. She looked up sleepily, then noticed the stranger by the truck. Who's that, Daddy? He's a lawyer, sweetheart. He knew your great-grandpa Elwood. We're going to get some breakfast and talk, okay? She nodded and rubbed her eyes. Can I get pancakes? You can get whatever you want. We walked across the street together. As soon as we stepped inside the diner, the warmth wrapped around us, and I realized how cold I had been all night. A waitress with tired eyes and a gentle smile led us to a corner booth. Mr. Kavanaugh ordered coffee for both of us, hot chocolate for Willa, and pancakes for her without even asking. When the waitress left, he opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. He placed it on the table and looked at me carefully. Mr. Danvers, he said, before I explain anything, you need to understand this. Your grandfather left very clear instructions. He wanted me to find you wherever you were, no matter the situation, and tell you everything in person. Tell me what, I said. Mr. Kavanaugh folded his hands on the table. Everything you believe about your grandfather's life after he left Ohio is wrong. What I'm about to tell you will change everything. He opened the folder and spread several papers across the table. I saw bank records, legal documents, property deeds, and photos of buildings I had never seen before. None of it made sense to me. When your grandfather left Ohio 14 years ago, he said, he told you he had unfinished business out west. That was true, but it wasn't the full story. I shook my head. I don't understand. He ran a small furniture shop his whole life. He never had money. He lived simply by choice, Mr. Kavanaugh replied, not because he had to. Soon after arriving in Arizona, my grandfather was contacted by a wealthy collector named Harold Pennington. Pennington owned valuable antique furniture, passed down through generations, and needed someone highly skilled to restore it. After searching for months, he found my grandfather. That first job took 8 months to complete. When it was finished, Pennington was so impressed that he introduced my grandfather to his powerful circle, museum directors, auction house leaders, and private collectors with enormous wealth. Within 2 years, my grandfather had more work than he could handle alone. He never told me any of this, I said. We spoke on the phone. He never mentioned it. He had his reasons, Mr. Kavanaugh said calmly. I'll explain that soon. He slid a photograph toward me. It showed a large, elegant building with tall windows. A sign read Danvers Heritage Restorations. This was your grandfather's first studio, he said. He opened it in Scottsdale in 2014. By 2017, he had expanded to 2 more locations, one in Santa Fe and one in Tucson. I stared at the picture. It looked nothing like the small, dusty shop where I had learned my trade. This was polished and professional on an entirely different level. But he didn't stop there, Mr. Kavanaugh continued. Your grandfather began buying damaged pieces himself. He had a rare ability to see value where others saw junk. He restored them to museum quality and sold them at auction. Some sold for 6 figures. 6 figures? I repeated, barely able to believe it. Over the past decade, he said, Danvers Heritage Restorations became one of the most respected names in the antique furniture world. At the time of his death, the company was valued at $22 million. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I looked at Willa, still happily eating her pancakes, completely unaware that everything about our future had just changed. Then I looked back at Mr. Kavanaugh, searching his face for any sign that this was a mistake or some kind of cruel joke. There's more, he said. Your grandfather owned 4 properties across Arizona and New Mexico. He also had a private collection of restored antiques worth about $3 million and liquid assets of nearly $8 million in different accounts. That's impossible, I whispered. My grandfather fixed furniture in a small shop in Columbus. He drove an old pickup truck and wore the same flannel shirts until they fell apart. Like I said, Mr. Kavanaugh replied, he lived simply by choice. He never wanted money to change who he was. Mr. Kavanaugh reached into the folder and pulled out an envelope. It was cream-colored, slightly worn, with my name written on the front in handwriting. I knew instantly, my grandfather's. He wrote this for you, Mr. Kavanaugh said. He asked me to give it to you after explaining the financial details. He wanted you to understand what he built before you understood why. My hands were shaking as I took the envelope. I felt Willa watching me now, her pancakes forgotten. Daddy, what's that? It's a letter from your great-grandpa Elwood, sweetheart. I opened the envelope and unfolded the pages. The handwriting was unsteady in places, a sign of the illness that must have taken him, but the words were clear. Corbin, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I wasn't there these past years. I wanted to be every single day. I wanted to call you and tell you everything. But I needed you to find your own path first. I needed to know you became the man I raised without my money guiding your choices. I watched you from a distance. I had people check on you and tell me how you were doing. I knew about your marriage. I knew about Willa. I knew how they treated you. And I knew you stayed because you loved your daughter more than your pride. That's how I knew I raised you right. Everything I built is yours now. Not because you need it, but because you earned it by being a good man when no one was watching. Take care of that little girl. And remember this, a man's worth is not measured by his bank account. It's measured by the lives he touches. I love you, son. I always did. Grandpa. I broke down right there in the diner booth. Tears ran down my face and I didn't care who saw. Willa climbed over and wrapped her arms around my neck. Don't cry, Daddy, it's okay. And it was, but not just sadness. It was grief, relief, love, and gratitude all mixed together into something I couldn't explain. My grandfather hadn't abandoned me. He had been watching over me the whole time, waiting until I needed him most. Somehow he had known that moment would come. I didn't rush to tell anyone about the inheritance. I spent Christmas Day in that diner with Willa, ordering more pancakes and hot chocolate while Mr. Kavanaugh explained the legal details. He arranged a hotel for us that night, a real bed, clean sheets, and a hot shower. Willa thought it was exciting. She didn't know that just a day earlier her father had almost given up. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Delaney. Corbin, we need to talk, she said. Her voice was careful, controlled, the voice she used when she wanted to manage a situation. I think Christmas Eve got out of hand. My mother was stressed and things were said that shouldn't have been. Maybe we can sit down and work through this. I let her speak. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I told her about the inheritance. I told her about the company, the properties, and the millions now in my name. I told her that the grandfather she never cared to ask about had built an empire doing the very work her family had mocked. The line was silent for a long time. When Delaney finally spoke again, her voice had changed completely. It was softer, warmer, almost sweet. Corbin, that's wonderful news, she said. This is exactly what we needed. A fresh start. Why don't you come home? We can celebrate together as a family. We can leave all of this behind us. I thought about those words. A fresh start. As if years of humiliation could be erased. As if her silence on Christmas Eve meant nothing. As if I hadn't heard her tell her mother she wanted to leave me. Just hours before I became wealthy. Delaney, when I was sleeping in my truck with our daughter on Christmas Eve, you didn't call once. Not to check if we were safe. Not to see if Willa was warm. Not to ask where we were or if we needed help. You didn't say a single word when your mother called me a broke loser and threw me out. And now you want to celebrate together as a family. Corbin, I was confused, she said. I didn't know what to do. You knew exactly what to do, I replied. You chose your family over me. You've been choosing them over me for years. The only difference now is that I finally see it clearly. I filed for divorce in January Delaney, and her parents tried to fight it, claiming I was an unfit father, unstable, and that sleeping in a parking lot with Willa proved poor judgment. But Mr. Kavanaugh connected me with the best family law attorney in Ohio, and every accusation fell apart. There was no evidence because there was no truth to it. The divorce was finalized in April. I was granted primary custody of Willa. Delaney received visitation rights, which she exercised for about 6 months before her visits became infrequent. Eventually, she moved to California with a man she met at a charity event. She sends Willa birthday cards sometimes, though often late. I used my grandfather's legacy to build something meaningful. I didn't abandon my Columbus shop. I expanded it. I hired 3 craftsmen who love the work as much as I do. I visit the Arizona studios twice a year to ensure my grandfather's standards are upheld. One Scottsdale location became a training program for young people eager to learn furniture restoration, kids hungry to work with their hands, just like I was. We've graduated 47 students so far. Some opened their own shops, some work for me, but all carry forward a piece of my grandfather's legacy. I also created a scholarship in his name for students pursuing trades and craftsmanship, funding 12 students annually across the country. Grandpa believed working with your hands was noble, that building, fixing and restoring things was valuable work. I want every young person with that calling to have the chance to pursue it. Willa is 9 now. She goes to a good school, has friends she loves, and spends her summers at the shop with me. She's learning to carve wood, just like I did with my grandfather. She's not perfect yet, but she's patient and determined. She reminds me of him every day. I think about that Christmas Eve sometimes. The cold seeping through the truck, Willa's small hand gripping mine as we walked out of that mansion. I think about the moment I believed my life was over. And I realize now that was the moment it truly began. People like the Holbrooks measure success in money and status. They look at a man who works with his hands and see someone beneath them. They never understood that the calluses on my palms are proof of purpose, integrity, pride, and honest work. My grandfather understood. He built a fortune doing what he loved, but he never let the money change who he was. He wore flannel shirts until they fell apart. He drove an old truck. He lived simply because simplicity was honest. And when the time came, he made sure his grandson had everything needed to build a good life. I'm still building that life. Every day, I wake up trying to be the man my grandfather raised me to be. I teach Willa the same lessons he taught me. I measure my worth not by my bank account, but by the lives I touch. Every night before bed, I say the same thing. Thank you, Grandpa. I'll make you proud. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that sometimes the lowest moments are the beginning of something incredible. Comment about a time when everything fell apart, and something beautiful came from the ashes. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Because no matter how dark the night, the morning always comes, and sometimes it brings everything you never knew you needed.